From where the West begins in Fort Worth, Texas, to around the globe, you are listening to Talk in the Night. I'm your host, Paranormal Phil, and later on in the show tonight, we're going to be joined by my guest, Dr. Joy Pugh, as we talk about preparing for the Antichrist and so much more. But first, on the story of the day up on the Talk in the Night website, who is the Antichrist? What does the Bible say about the Antichrist? In the Bible, the Bible prophecies an end times figure who oppose Christ, the Antichrist, but the meaning of the term Antichrist encompasses more than just the end times. The term literally means against Christ, and it's various defined as adversary of Christ or opponent of Christ, as title or proper name for a specific individual who opposes the claims to be Christ. The Greek English lexicon of the New Testament, based on Semitic domains by Loanita, offer a more compelling definition. And of course, I'm not going to get into the whole story about it, but you can read the story up on the Talk in the Night website, just because I got too much in there and I got to kind of update it, because when I was writing a misspelled thing, I didn't do a proper spell check and everything, make sure everything was right. So I got to fix that, but I'll fix that in a bit. But let's bring on my guest to talk about the Antichrist, the Shroud of Turin, end times, Armageddon, Eden, and so much more. So welcome to the show, Joy.
Thank you so much for having me on your show tonight. I'm looking forward to it, and also the questions and chat room and that kind of thing that we'll be involved with during the show. So thank you very much for having me as your guest.
It's a pleasure having you on. So let's start off by telling the listeners a little bit about you.
Well, I live in South Georgia and have lived here all my life. And my doctorate is in administration, so I am not a preacher. I am a teacher. And my work encompasses, so much, from everything from biogenetics to even in the paranormal of UFOs and aliens and strange occurrences in the sun, moon, and stars. So my research is very broad, and all of my books encompass so much research in all those areas to try to bring everything to the table to really explain what biblical prophecy has been trying to tell us for years and years. I kind of combine science and religion together to prove that what the Bible has told us over the years is in fact coming to pass within the generation in which we live. And in my website, I go through a lot of little things in my website. If anybody wants to go and look at the website, I try to show a little bit of some of the research that I'm doing and have been doing for quite some time.
All right. And of course, people that read the Bible, especially Revelation and everything like that, it talks all about the end times and the coming of Christ and everything like that. Now, I think it was in the email, and it might be on your book or website as well, but the email that you originally sent me to be a guest on the show, you talked about a dream that you had at the age of 6 about the end times. Care to tell the listeners a little bit about that?
Well, I was born and raised on a South Georgia farm, and of course I'm older, and so therefore there was not a lot of things that I was exposed to that would have had anything to do in regard to what you would normally think about the book of Revelation and what it talks about the end of days. And I just went to sleep one night, just like a 6-year-old little kid would do, and I drifted off to sleep, and all of a sudden I was standing and watching on a hillside a complete destruction of what I believed was everything that I could see as far as the eye could see. And it was such a amazing sight, but a fearful sight because of the destruction and the level of destruction. Something that I had never seen on TV or heard about or anything like that, other than maybe if I had heard it in church, but been able to visualize it, I don't think I could have been able to do that. So it was almost like it was a vision. And in that vision, I saw what I believe was the end of days. And the destruction was actually in the valley of Armageddon over it in the Middle East. And the amount of destruction I have never seen even today when I've watched Hollywood try to put together, end time kind of scenarios. It's never even anywhere near, they've never come anywhere near what I saw. And the colors and the things that were there and what was left was just absolutely, an atomic bomb can't even, I don't think, do what I saw. And so, in seeing all that and experiencing it, then I also, of course, realized that there was no sound left. And that was a very strange feeling because I've never been in a place, even closed up in a room, where I could say you cannot hear your own breathing.
Wow.
That there was absolutely no sound. And I think that was the most frightening, was that you were watching something and the fire and the brimstone and the destruction, but there was no sound in it. And you couldn't feel wind, you couldn't feel anything. And then, of course, being a child, I appeared to turn, and when I did, I saw that there was this only thing standing. To me, it looked like the same blocks that are on the Temple Mount. Mm-hmm. And when I turned to go to that one little area, because I was so afraid that I thought, I'm the only person left, what I've seen is just absolute destruction. Nobody else, there's no human being left, literally. And when I went running to try to protect myself from what I was seeing, around behind it, there was this being standing there, and he was looking out over the top of this wall that had been broken down, jagged down. And he had a white linen garment on, and he had like a gold thing that was kind of like a rope-looking thing around his waist. And his hair was down shoulder length and a little bit longer in the back, and he had a beard. And when I went to turn to look at him, thinking, oh, you know how you'd be so scared when you were a child, and you could just see somebody, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's somebody here. And when he turned and looked at me, his eyes were the most piercing blue eyes. I mean, Paul Newman's eyes don't even come close to the eyes that I saw on this man. And it was almost like, oh my gosh, there's really somebody here. And he looked at me, and in all my fear, he just reached kind of at me and said, never fear, you're never alone. I'm always with you. And that moment I woke up and immediately got up out of the bed, went running down the hall to my grandmother, who was my confidant and everything, and woke her up and told her I needed to go to the church right then. I needed to be saved. And she, of course, said, now, child, I'm 6 years old. Yeah. And she's trying to get me to calm down, and I'm not calming down because this is really like beyond it was more than a night. I mean, I've had nightmares. It's nothing like, it was like a vision, colors, the whole 9 yards, because typically we don't supposed to dream in color. Yeah. I saw everything in color. Everything was in color. And so she tried to, get me to calm down, try to get me to believe that it was just a dream, try to soothe me, get me back into bed, and hoping that I would forget it. But I never, ever forgot it, and knew that whatever it was something so significant. So it caused me for the rest of my life to try to find out what it was that I had seen.
To try and figure out the what that meant.
Oh, well, that's right, because it was something that I couldn't get out of my mind. And of course, I was in church. I'd always gone to church, and she was in fact a Sunday school teacher. But when I would start bringing this stuff up, they'd say, "Just don't let it bother you. It was just a dream." They believed that you had to be like 12 years old or older to join the church. That you need to be at the age of accountability. But literally, I was so afraid that was about to happen. And I wanted to make sure that the man with the blue eyes, I wanted to be with him because he looked okay and everything else did not look okay. And so when I turned about 12, between 12 and 13, that's when I really sat down to read the book of Revelation. And I was like, oh my gosh, this explains so much. Because most of your Sunday school things are very, for young people anyway, or young kids, it's like little Bible stories. You don't hear about the end of days. I mean, you hear about Joseph in the color, just, coat of many colors. You have positive little things, nothing negative. And like I say, I grew up at a time when, on TV was Lassie and Walt Disney and Flipper, so there wasn't anything to say, well, you had been exposed to something of that magnitude. I had not been. And so when I read the book of Revelation at that age, it was like, oh my gosh, this makes sense. And then I was in a store, my mother, at a Rexall drugstore, because that was the only place you could buy books years ago on a little spin thing. And Hal Lindsey had written a book called The Great Lake Planet Earth. And I picked it up and started thumbing through it, and I just started begging my mother, please buy this book for me. And I'd always been a person, I always went to the library, I always read, but, they just didn't have books like that around. And when I started reading, I was like, oh my gosh, for some reason this man really knows something that I have seen. And so my mother finally gave in and did buy the book for me, and when I got home, I just devoured it. I couldn't stop reading it. It was like, oh my gosh, somebody really understands what I saw. So that dream, even though I went through school and I studied, there was always aspects in everything that I did in school. If I had to write a paper, if I had to do a speech, if I had to do something, it was always in relationship to end of days, and religious, underpinnings, I guess you could say, because a lot of times in schools, especially as I got on into college, they were so scared about, mixing collegiate work with Christian work, especially if you were not in a Christian college, I guess. So I was fortunate that in college, I did have a couple of professors that when I wanted to write a thesis on something, that I could go and say, look, I really want to research this. There's something about this Alpha and Omega, beginning and end, light and darkness, that's a little bit more than what I think people are realizing how serious this is. It's not like a Bible bedtime story. There's something to all this. So I had several professors all the way through my doctorate that allowed me to bring those things to the table, and as long as I was able to defend them, as any other person who might have a theory or whatever, if you could defend it based on, text and case studies and what was out in the literature, then, your grade was going to be based on that. So many times I took the chance that I was looking at something that I couldn't find a lot of things written about it, even though what I believed what I'd seen was real. But when I was able to find those things, it would just solidify what I had actually seen. So thank goodness, I had professors who were willing to let me do that. So once I got my doctorate, I sat down one day and said, under the circumstances, my mother was very sick and had cancer, and I was going to be going with her consistently for her chemo. So I started reading all the books I could get my hands on, and then at night I would come home and I would type all night long. And eventually I had a book. And like I say, it was the beginning of me being an author and being able to put the work out that I believe that at the age of 6, I was led to believe in that vision what is going to happen to us and what's going to happen to this world. And now, having studied so many religions and so much stuff, that I can honestly say that my work is to literally prove that what's coming, we've been told it's going to happen. And it's not pretty. And it's not a bedtime story. And when you read my work, I have several people that say, I sure don't like to read your book before I close my eyes at night. Because it really does. I mean, where a lot of people write things just, I guess, to sell a book, or they're not sure about things and they're maybe theorizing. My research is based on truth. And I'm not trying to fool myself. And there's a lot of things that I had questions about, and I wanted the answers because these things were really worrying me from a standpoint that I felt like I had witnessed something. And so like I say, the books that I have done, the Beguile series, the Eden series, the Antichrist series, they're very research books. And I've written them so that they're interesting. A lot of people say I write kind of novel-like, but that everything's crammed in so much. You're reading so much that I do have some people say, I have to read the paragraph twice because I can't get over all the stuff that's going in my brain at one time. But I've tried to write it in such a way that it's not like a doctor typically would write. It's not written like a college book or something like that. It's written so that somebody that's as young as I was at 12 when I read Hal Lindsey's work, that I could understand it. And I tried to do that in this, is that I've tried to explain it enough that if you are a young person and you pick up my work, that you can get something out of it. It does make sense. It will allow you to build on knowledge, and then you kind of take stepping stones right on up until you hopefully start doing this research on your own to really prove to your own self that what I'm trying to tell you is in fact the truth. And it's taken a lot of my life to do all of this. I've been researching and writing and putting processes of thesis and papers together until, now I have all these books that are out there and are available for people to get and to read.
Well, like me, I've been in the paranormal field for almost 30 years and everything like that, but I had my first experience with the spirit world when I was 5 years old. And growing up with my family, Baptist and everything like that, I thought, like most people these days, if a child sees a spirit or something like that, they're like, oh, it's just their imagination, it's not real, stuff like that. And what you were talking about, where people told you that, oh, it's nothing and stuff like that, what you had to, as far as that dream goes, I mean, same thing that a lot of people, when they're young, were told stuff like this isn't real. But the way I explain it is people, when children are at an early age, our minds are not corrupted by the everyday world, and we're able to actually see that kind of stuff and then we get older, and then it just, like I said, people say it's not real, it's just our imagination, stuff like that. But luckily, my parents, even though they were Baptists, they said, of course, my mom could see the spirits too, but she was like, don't worry about it. And it's real. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to take my childhood and actually learn about this stuff. So of course, I never wrote a book, but I always was interested in the paranormal, whether it be ghosts and spirits, whether it be cryptid creatures, UFOs, stuff like that. I mean, going up to Canada during the summers in my early teens, most kids would want a toy on a trip like that. Me, I wanted a book on Bigfoot, so.
Well, you're like me, you were inquisitive. And I think that because we had these situations when we were young, and I do agree that I believe a lot of children have these things, and then they're suppressed because people tell them, don't worry about it, don't let this bother you, whatever. And especially in my Eden book, I tried to go into detail about the little people, the spirit world. I even talk about the cattle mutilations and the UFOs and supposed aliens that I believe have a connection to fallen angels, and connect all of the dots for that. The intent, I think, has been that most people can't explain it. And so it's easier to say, don't let it bother you, than to tell people that it's real. And I've said this many, many times, that the most paranormal book that's ever been written is, in fact, the Bible. I've never read a paranormal book that has anything quite as straightforward as biblical scripture explains, and that is that there are spirits, there are fallen angels, there are angels, Holy Ghost. There are all these things that are here with us that we literally cannot see. And if you believe the Bible, then if you're going to believe it, you got to believe every word of it, because it's not like you can pick and choose in it. It is what it is. And even, biblical scripture explains to us that, like the witch of Endor, and she sat on an oracle, and she conjured up Samuel and spoke to her. The Bible never tells us that did not happen. It tells us it did happen. It also tells us that Jesus walked on water. It also tells us that Jesus was raised from the dead. It tells us about the spirits and about demonic entities that live within people, and that was actually driven out of somebody when Christ cast them out. Well, these beings actually talked to Jesus, and he talked back to them. And then they ran into the swine. The swine, went off the cliff and drowned themselves. So if you look at what it's telling us that there's something here with us, that it's very real. It even tells you that you don't fight against flesh and blood in this life, that you are fighting against principalities and powers in high places. Mm-hmm. And many, many times, especially if you believe in the gifts of the Spirit, when people speak in tongues, when they pray in the Spirit, it is a language that you do not know. If it's presented in a public atmosphere, there's usually someone who can interpret it. But in a prayer language, you don't even know what you're saying, but it's affecting you, because most times when you do this, you will cry. You will feel something within you being pulled. Yeah. And my research that I did on the pineal gland in my Beguiled series of volume 1, 2, and 3 is extensive, because it explains that the third eye that's in our forehead has a lot of connection to the Creator. And I try to use the science in that so that people understand that we were actually established to have a communion with a Creator. And that even our DNA that we have in our body, each one of us, our DNA is singing. In other words, we are vibrating. And so we are making a noise or a sound. And God, being a great conductor of his creation, knows your song. He knows my song. He knows everybody's song. It's like a conductor in an orchestra. If he knows his third violinist is supposed to be playing this, this, and this, while the other ones are doing that, well, if he's not doing that, he knows it. He can hear it. If the string on the third violin breaks, he's going to know that string broke, because now it's not in harmony. Yeah. And so the ability of something that could manufacture a creation like we live in, if we just look at a computer program that a human can put together, and when you know that something's not spelt right, whatever, imagine a mind that is so encompassing that it could hear everybody singing, everybody with a different tune. It's no different than a snowflake. No two snowflakes are alike. Yeah. Nobody's fingerprints are alike. Nobody's DNA is singing alike. So that separates us, so that if there was a big computer, it would know you, and it would know me, and it would know everything else about us. So, trying to make people understand that we live in a world that's very paranormal.
I tried to tell people when I do my show and everything like that, that I mentioned that everybody is born with this gift. We were given this gift, and how we use it, that's up to how we want to do it. But I mean, with me, what I consider a light worker. I have worked with the light because I don't like the darkness, and the darkness hates me because I'm a light worker. But I tried to explain to everybody has this gift. It's just a matter of unlocking that ability, unless you're reinforced at an early age that you have this gift.
Well, I think that light is really, really important, and I could not figure out, in perfect light, time stands still. And I've always thought it was strange that in eternity, that time was no more. And the thing that really made me get close to the understanding of pure light is the fact that we can only see the spectrum of light within a certain framework of even in the rainbow colors. Mm-hmm. So when you are just your inability to see light in its fullness, and you're limited by it, it's the same thing as cloaking. In other words, something can be right in front of your face, but if you bend light a certain way, you can't see it. But it's there. It's literally there. And when you take that bent of light away, there can be something right almost at your nose that you couldn't see as long as that light was bent in a certain area. So, the Bible talks about we see through a glass darkly, but, one day we will be able to see totally. Well, if we could see right now, I fully believe in the complete light spectrum, then we would probably be able to see what the Bible says when people cross through the veil, like Elijah and Elisha. They were able to see armies and legions of angels and all these kind of strange things that were all around them that the normal people could not see. So like I say, when you look at the Bible, people have always been afraid to kind of just take it for what it's saying and really get to the crust of the matter and not get so caught up in what they've been taught. I try to tell people, start all over again. I learned so much by just starting verse 1, chapter 1, first word. Even though I had gone through all my life in Sunday school and church, there were so many things I had missed because you hear people talk about things and you form your opinions on somebody's theory. You need to go back and read it for yourself because it's quite amazing that a book of that magnitude, we're talking about something that was taken from Hebrew and Greek. And, I've done research on equidistant letter sequencing. The Hebrew Bible, the way it was written, was in certain letters. And those letters were copied very closely because when you do equidistant letter sequencing, you can actually find names and dates. And I talk about this in my work of people that was their name and their date of birth and their date of death. And you're like, how could something already know all that? You can't use it as a fortune teller, but once something happens, you can verify that it's already written. And the Bible tells us that everything is there in the book of life. And the thing about it is that now that we can do things through computers, where the Hebrew sages could count these things and know about it, that's why it tells you in the Bible not to change nothing. Don't change anything. Because the equidistant letterings, if it changes, then you mess up what's internal. So in a book, and there's no other, and I've tried to look at other books for equidistant letter sequencing, and you can't find these things in it. So when you sit down to do equidistant letter sequencing and you see that there's the historical stuff is already there. Things from way back to right up till today, and it's all within a block of chapters. And then you go, okay. In other words, when you read the scripture, it means one thing. Then you can break down, let's say, the chapter and down to the individual scripture itself, their own verse. And then you can break it down to just the Hebrew lettering. And then you can break down the Hebrew lettering. And the interesting thing about Hebrew lettering is that sound can create a Hebrew letter. Just the vibration will cause it to form a letter in sand. So, when the Bible tells us that in the beginning God said, or, God said, let there be light, sound is what actually presented itself and actually made what was. So if you think about, we use like MRIs now with, the magnetic
I hate to cut you
resonance
off.
between magnets.
I hate to cut you off, Joy, but we're at the first commercial break. We'll be right back with my guest, Joy Pugh, as we talk about the Antichrist and all her books and everything else. We'll be right back. Are you a ghost hunter or paranormal enthusiast and need equipment to go out and investigate locations that have spirit activity? Well, GhostStop.com has all the equipment that you will need. They have a Boo Buddy ghost hunting kit for $169.95, or how about a Keep Calm and Ghost Hunt t-shirt for $19.95. Click on the banner ad at the top of the Talking Tonight website and get shopping today. GhostStop.com, your one-stop shop for all your ghost hunting needs. Do you have a paranormal team? Are you a small-time author? Do you have a radio show that you would like to promote? Is there anything that you would like to get the word out there about but don't have a big budget? Well, Talking Tonight has an opportunity for you to sponsor the show without breaking your wallet. Contact the show at talkingtonight@outlook.com or on the show's website or Facebook page for more details. Do you think you have a haunted or cursed object? Well, Nicole Gaspard does, and in her book Haunted Vessels and Cursed Objects, she talks about her continued paranormal and supernatural ghost encounters, haunted dolls, and other items that are supposed to be haunted or cursed. Pick up your copy today on Amazon.com. Okay, and we are back with my guest, Joy Pugh, and before the break we were talking, and during the break we were talking about different things, but before the break we were talking about what the Bible teaches us versus what a lot of people are taught these days. I mean, they believe what they're told rather than actually picking up the book or anything like that and doing the research themselves and learning this stuff. That's what
worries me, is that people don't really stop to think what we're being told. I mean, it's too much. And I understand when we're in school that we're taught certain things and they have, some rhyme and reason to all of that. But as an individual who lives in a world that we live in, it's quite obvious that there's no way that this all could have happened just by chance. And, the thing about is that once we have been created, the law of thermodynamics says that you can't ever not exist, because once energy is created, it's always going to be there. It may be in a different form, just like we see ice and heat and, dew and then evaporation, and then it can freeze, and it's all in a different state, but it's still the same thing. we ourselves are the same way. Once we've been created in an energy form, whether we die or alive, that energy is always going to be there. It can never be destroyed because it's energy. So somewhere, all of this has a reason and a rhyme behind it. And the more you research it, you find out that these small things that you haven't really stopped to think about add up. And then there's a bigger picture as to what we're experiencing. You know, you need to know why you're here. It's not like you're a grain of sand on a beach and when you close your eyes and death is over with. It's not, because you can't kill energy. You're going to be existing in some form or another after death. Yeah. And my interest really became great in this with the Shroud of Turin and the research that I did on the Shroud of Turin. Because when I saw pictures of the Shroud of Turin back in the early 70s, I immediately knew the person in the picture, because he matched the man that I saw in my vision at 6 years of age. Yeah. It was like, oh my gosh, I know this guy. I've seen this man. So where the Shroud of Turin, which was the burial cloth of Jesus that he was wrapped in, and he resurrected through, I immediately was like, oh my gosh, this man is alive. That's really his shroud. That's not a fake. And so when I began doing my research, I wanted to know everything I could know about the shroud. And the image that was put on the shroud has never been able to be recreated. But when you think about pure light, like we were talking about earlier, yeah, the true light of God would be complete pureness. It would be the established.
It's not going to be bent,
spark of
different
perfect
colors. It's
right.
Just
it would be pure
white light.
And if it was so pure, then when he resurrected through that cloth, it could leave that impression on that cloth like that. Well, what that would mean for us, it proves that there's life after death. Now, most people who don't want in other words, they want to live their life and they don't want to follow the guidebook that God gave us. And honest to goodness, the Bible is, like I say, it's in different layers. We could do a show on just the different layers of the Bible and see that no human being could ever have written that work. Nobody could have ever done it because of the layers in it. But if you just want to think, well, it's lights out, I can party, I don't have anybody I have got to answer to, you know, if you can live like that, that's fine. But if you want to know the truth, you're going to exist in some form afterward. And like I say, because I saw this person, and I truly believe that shroud is what he went through, then it proves that there's life after death. Well, let's look at the religions, and what does it say about life after death and what's going to happen in da-da-da-da-da. Well, I don't know any other religion that had somebody go to a cross that died and resurrected again. When they all died, they died, and you didn't hear anything else from them. So, again, you need to stop and think, how important is this to you? Is it worth, let's say, 70, 80, 90 years on this earth doing your own thing when science is already telling you that energy that you are is unique in itself? It's got a vibrational pattern that's you. And when you kick out of here, it's still in existence. It's not like it went away. So you've got to be somewhere within the spiritual realm that we're talking about in existence. And if there's a creator, then you got to stop and think, well, what's his expectations of anything that's created within his world? Just like if you were a computer programmer, if somebody started hacking in on your stuff, then you may have a thing set up. You keep hacking, this is what's going to happen to you. So if you put it in the bigger, broader context, then you can say, well, this mind of God, and if he's telling you, I'm not going to deal with this, I don't want darkness in my light anymore, going all the way back when I did extensive stuff into the Garden of Eden and what happened in Eden and why the Garden of Eden story is so important, because it just mixes itself from those lineages that came out of Eden all the way to the end of days. And really, it's what brings about the Antichrist. So the intent was, in the beginning, in creation of us, was to be in a paradise and not have darkness. But because darkness mingled in with the light, then he's carrying us through this period of time to get back where he's going to separate the darkness and the light. It'll never be a mixture, because God didn't mix anything. If he separated it.
Now, did that darkness start in like the time of Eden and Adam and Eve and stuff like that?
What I believe is that the existence of different generational periods occurred. So when our Bible starts, it's picking up where something has happened, where something has made something void and not good. Because when creation starts in the Bible again, it says that God made man and woman to replenish the earth. And the fact that he uses the word replenish doesn't say he started it. He's saying he replenished it. So I think there's been generations. And if you go back and you look at books that are outside of the Bible, that at one time, like the Book of Enoch was included, and you've got Maccabees and Jubilees. There's a lot of books that are talked about, even about the kings, in the books of the kings, that are not in the Bible, but that it mentions that they're there and that they were appropriately known and believed. The Book of Enoch talks about the sons of darkness and the sons of light and their fight, and that the fallen angels were actually thrown out. And then all of a sudden we have, the establishment of earth and replenishing it again, and then we have we're going a step further and developing the Garden of Eden, in which he creates man on the outside and brings him in, but while he's there, he takes a rib and forms Eve. And then we have generations of lineages coming out of Eden that were told to not engage in evil and darkness and to stay away from the tree of good and evil. In the scriptures, it says when God created, he created things as their kind or in their likeness. He didn't mix anything. In other words, if he made an apple tree, he made an apple tree. He didn't make an apple tree that produced oranges and apples. If he created a blackbird, the blackbird created a blackbird. They didn't create a red, a black, and a mixed bird. Yeah. The intent was for everything to not mix. Mixing was a bad thing. When you think about the tree of life that was in the Garden of Eden, it was the tree of life. And they could eat of that. They would continue to have had, perfection, paradise, forever. But when he told Adam and Eve, stay away from the tree of good and evil, again, look at what it's saying, the tree of good and evil. There was a mixture. There was something unusual and strange about that. So when you look at the fact that Lucifer, and we can go back into the Book of Enoch, that when Lucifer was over, he was like one of the top cherubs in the creation of archangels. You had like Michael and Gabriel, and you had Lucifer, and they were over the other angels. There's like a hierarchy of angels, and when Lucifer was wanting the worship, that he was kind of probably over the worship area, and when he wanted worship like he was given to God, then he was still good, but that good turned into evil because of jealousy, of rebellion, of whatever made him decide he wanted to be like God. And he could never do that. And that's the thing that always worries me about people who trust in Lucifer or Satan as we know him, or the great dragon, is that he was a created being. The God that created everything has no beginning and no end. And sometimes that's so hard for us to wrap around in our mind, because everything we have ever known has a beginning and end. So when something just was, and it created something else, then anything it created can never be what the original was. So even though Satan or Lucifer wanted to be like that, and was willing to rebel against it because he wanted to have that same kind of worship, he can never be equal to it, because he's created. The other thing was not created. And then that mixture of bringing in something different than what it was. You know, Satan was already, or Lucifer was already in what we would call a spiritual state of eternalness, because that's the way they were created. Where you and I were created in a reality of, you know, life and death, and that we do have a spiritual being or part of us that lives within us that does, when we die, it does leave. And of course, my research into near-death experiences where people see the cord and people do astral travel. There's all kinds of things where people get outside of the body, and you can look back and your body's there.
Go ahead.
Right, your body's there, and you can.
Cutting you off. I'm sorry. I was going to say OBEs, NDEs, astral projection. Trying to think, there was one more I was thinking of. I can't think of it right now, but stuff like that.
Right, and it's really real. The ability to leave the body, even the Bible talks about it when they were looking at Christ when he was up in the mountain, and they saw him really become kind of transparent. And they were even things like being caught away and moved from place to place. I mean, things that were really what we would think would be like an unusual experience, where you were outside of the body in some way. And it even talks about some of the scriptures. I don't know whether I was in the body or outside the body. I mean, you know, the writers of the Bible even mention in scripture about having experiences like that. And most people who had near-death experiences, you know, they'll say if they were, let's say, in a car accident, they can see their body all mangled, but yet they're above it, and they can look at their self. They don't have any hurt, but they know they're who they are, and that they look identical to what that body looks like that's laying down there.
Yeah, well, I had I had a friend that had a near-death experience. He suffers from grand mal seizures, and he was laying on the ground, and the paramedics were working on him, but he was standing above his body, looking down and seeing it, but it wasn't like he was really there. I mean, he was outside his body, and he was experiencing what he was seeing down there on the ground.
That's right. And every case study that I've ever done with people, and I'm talking about case studies where people sitting face to face with me talking about these things and drawing these things out and being able to tell you what the doctors and nurses said, and they were totally dead. You know, clinically they were dead. So you literally have to go, again, this is paranormal activity. And it's things that people need to be discussing, because if you don't talk about this and explain that it's really real, then you miss the understanding of that there is something that controls all of this. And it has given us a mind. We're not robots. We have the ability of free will. We can make every choice we make every day is our choice. And then in the end, according to what Scripture says, there is going to be a judgment. And it's based on your choices. In other words, you're not going to be based on somebody else's choices. You can't say, well, so-and-so made me do it. You're going to be faced with, I made these choices, I did these things, and it's something you need to be aware of, that it's just not lights out, because there is no way that something could exist out of nothing. I mean, you can't make something out of nothing.
Well,
the fact,
I was going to say, like me, being a Wiccan, I believe once we leave our physical body, because our bodies are just a vessel for our spirit, our energy, and everything like that. But we go to a place called the Summerlands. I mean, it could be, each religion has, and I've found this out through my many years of research into the paranormal, that every different religion has a different version. But if you think about what those different versions are. Like Christians believe in heaven, hell. I believe in a higher plane of existence and lower plane of existence, which can be construed as heaven and hell. I believe in light energies and dark energies, or entities, I should say, which can be construed as demons or angels and stuff like that. But people are so set on their beliefs sometimes that they're not open to understand that even though a different religion has a different saying, it can be construed as the same thing as what they believe in, but they're just not open to that.
Well, I think so many times when you look back about how religion got separated from each other, it's based on a lot of interpretation. And I know that in a long time ago, they didn't have the science to look at what was being said, and sometimes people just get angry and just start something else because they don't want to be different than what the other one was. Sometimes it can be a negative thing, especially if, like I say, if you haven't sat down and read these things yourself and to get an understanding of the whole picture. There is absolutely no way, like I was mentioning before, that any of this just is a big bang and happened. There's no way that could occur. The evolutionary process, if that was the case, then, the cockroach is one of the oldest existing things, goes all the way back to the fossil records. It's never changed. You can't change one thing and not change something else. I mean, you got to look at it from a science standpoint as to what it's really telling you. And to me, when you have near-death experiences and you have people who see these things and experience them and can tell you that there's something else that lives within us that looks like us, it thinks like us, it's still us, when death is happening, that it is existing somewhere. And for people who have stepped out of the body and they've seen that, it changes their lives forever. They're not afraid of death, but they know that whatever choices they make in this life, they're going to have to answer for something, because most of them will encounter some kind of light or some kind of existence. And let me tell you, the people that experience the hellfire and brimstone thing, those people are literally changed beyond words from doing anything bad ever again. I mean, they can't do enough good because of what they saw in that light. But, if you experience evil, and like you say, the darkness and the light, and the fact that there are terrible entities that do live among us, and I talk about in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a Sumerian text that I mentioned in my Eden series. There was a giant, and people don't stop to think, well, what does this mean? But in the archaeological findings that we have found, we know that there were giants, that there were strange things. Even this Sasquatch that everybody, laugh about, Bigfoot, I don't think it's anything funny to laugh about. I mean, we're talking about giants existing after the flood that had six toes and 6 fingers on one hand, and these things were real. They were not fake and phony. And before the flood, they were even bigger. I mean, think about how big they may have been. They were called cedars. I mean,
it's also written down in history of these things out there, like giants and stuff like that. In our history, it's just not per se saying right out it's a big old giant like you would see in like a fairy tale, but it's not saying something like that, but it's written in our history through the Bible and other places.
That's right. And the thing that is interesting to me is that in every race and religion there was a flood. I mean, every one of them, going all the way back in their history, there was a major flood on this earth. So, the things that we sometimes don't stop to think about what made us what we are and how all this got to be the way it is, then we need to pay attention. If it told us all that happened and that all happened, then what it's telling us in the future is going to happen, we need to be paying attention to it. And I think that's the thing that worries me, is that with fake news and things that are happening now, you don't know really what the truth is about things. And it's interesting to me that a book, especially the book of Revelation that was written 2,000 years ago by John the Revelator on the Isle of Patmos during his prison sentence there, it's coming so true in today's world. And I'm always amazed by the fact that somebody 2,000 years ago could write something that would be so apropos in everything, from the changes in the sun, the moon, the stars, the earthquakes, the floods, the fires, all these things that are happening, along with changes in humanity, the deaths of the numbers of birds and fish and all kinds of animals and insects, becoming extinct. I mean, we're looking at a lot of things that we were told would start happening, like birth pains and like a woman in travail. And it said, as the end of days goes closer to the end of days, that we're going to find that these things increase in their intensity and they get closer together, just like a woman who's getting ready to deliver a baby. And if anybody's ever been around a woman who starts having labor pains, they may be like 1 or 2 every now and then. And then as it gets closer to time of delivery, those pains get greater in intensity and they get closer and closer together until the birth of that baby happens.
Yeah.
So where I was doing research in these fields a long time ago, and I might be able to find bits and pieces of information, now these things are happening on a daily basis. And they're getting in so much more intense. And then when you start looking at what the Bible says now, when these things start happening, there's also going to be a falling away. There's going to be a generation of lawlessness. There's going to be a man.
We can see that happening in today's world.
Oh, yes. More than ever in any time in history. I mean, most times, even though there were wars in the past, there was still this love of your fellow man.
Yeah,
and
like
now it's more like if somebody's...
like the Civil War, it was brother against brother, but they still had that sense of like family and stuff like that. But where nowadays it's just, if you believe like in like taking political stuff, I mean, if you're a Democrat, you hate the Republicans, and the Republicans hate Democrats and stuff like that. It's like, why? We're all the same. We're cut from the same cloth.
Right. And it's like something is trying to destroy us. And I guess that's why I feel like my work is so important right now, is to understand what it is and why it's trying to destroy us. It does not want us to have our souls saved. It does not want us to return back to total light, away from the darkness. It wants to take us into the darkness and forever keep us in that darkness. And if this time in history has ever been a time to wake up and look around you as to what you're choosing to do or participating in, unfortunately, sometimes masses can draw people to get into stuff that they wouldn't normally do. And like I said, if there's a creator, you're going to have to answer for what you did. You can't say, well, I was led into this. Today's
you had
world
the choice to do it or not.
Right. A long time ago, like say for the Bible, I mean, if you weren't going to hear it by some, priest in the Catholic Church until Martin Luther brought it out and we started printing the Bibles and whatever, and you could read it on your own. But today, everybody's got a cell phone, that's literally a computer in your hand. So it's not like you can't look up these things and you can't make your mind up. If you're following after other people and you're getting sucked into stuff and you don't really know why you're into it, then you're going to be responsible for what your choices were, because you were giving an individual mind with an individual vibration to your creator. And you're going to answer to that. It's not like it's just freedom to do whatever I want to do and there's no consequences. And it told us that the end of days would be like that, where people were totally lawless. And, when you can see people laying on the ground dying of stuff and somebody's filming it just show on Facebook and they don't even lend a hand to help out, if that's not the most cruel uncaring, selfish, selfie that you could ever be. I mean, it's the spirit of Cain, and that's what it says. At the end of days, you're going to see that kind of behavior, and it's going to bring about a generation of lawlessness. And the Antichrist is that thing and that being that will promote that lawlessness, because if he can do that, then it will actually send all those people in a mass acceptance, because it says at the end of days you're going to be totally deceived by it. You won't be able to tell the truth from the lie. And, you know, we're really getting to that point that when I turn on the news, I'm like, which particular industries is putting this on, and are they not wanting me to turn the channel, and are they, ripping it toward this way?
I hate to interrupt again, but we're at the commercial break, so we'll be right back with my guest, Dr. Joy Pugh, as we talk about the Antichrist and the coming of Armageddon and everything else. We'll be right back.
Do you have a talk radio, Facebook Live, or YouTube show and would like guests for your show but don't know where to go to get them? Well, go to radioguestlist.com and sign up today. They have all different experts in different fields, and you can find the ones that are just right for your show. That's radioguestlist.com. Sign up today. It's free.
If you like finding out about different things in the paranormal field, such as ghost stories, haunted locations, UFOs, cryptozoology, and much more, well, check out Into the Paranormal on YouTube, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. Videos are posted once a week. Are you a ghost hunter or paranormal enthusiast and need equipment to go out and investigate locations that have spirit activity? Well, GhostStop.com has all the equipment that you will need. They have a Boo Buddy ghost hunting kit for $169.95, or how about a Keep Calm and Ghost Hunt t-shirt for $19.95. Click on the banner ad at the top of the Talking Tonight website and get shopping today. GhostStop.com, your one-stop shop for all your ghost hunting needs. To call into the show, Skype Talk in the Night, or by phone at 817-717-5561. And now, back to Talk in the Night with your host, Paranormal Phil. Okay, and we are back with my guest, Dr. Joy Pugh, as we talk about preparing for the rise of the Antichrist, and, of course, her books, which we'll get into a little bit later. But we also have the phone lines open if you want to call into the show, ask my guests a question, or if you're listening on Spreaker, you can click on the little chat bubble, pop in there, ask a question. Don't be afraid to pop in there and ask a question. And of course, one thing I never got to mention when we were talking in the first half of the show is, and of course a lot of people haven't had this experience, but I have actually had the chance while I was in the Navy to visit the Holy Land, Jerusalem, see the tomb of Christ and everything like that.
Which is quite amazing.
Yeah, you get to see the Wailing Wall, the Dome of the Rock, all that, and it's a whole culture clash that most people don't get a chance to experience, because once you go there, it's almost like life-changing.
I agree. And I do think that the fact that we now have the ability with Google Earth to be able to feel like you can look at it on a computer screen, and you can kind of panoramic around, it gives you a little bit of a understanding of what, and the area, because in books a long time ago, or if a TV show did something, it was a quick whatever. Where now you can just stay in those areas and panoramic slowly and get a vision of what it's really like there.
Yeah, but actually seeing the pictures and actually being there, it is
it's so different.
So different. I mean, you experience what it was like back in the time of Jesus Christ and everything like that.
It's an amazing thing, and that's why I say when people don't know if they really want to believe something, but if history has been written, and we're talking about history like, Josephus wrote the history of the Jews, in which he mentions Jesus. It's not like Jesus is only mentioned in the Bible and nowhere else. So it's important to get a grip that what we're being told about in regard to the Middle East and why we fight over all that area. I mean, it was prophesied that was always going to be that way from the time that, that Moses took the Hebrew children away from Pharaoh and went through the Red Sea, and the Red Sea, of course, sailed down on Pharaoh and his army and killed them. They were headed to the Promised Land. I mean, that land was for a reason. And the fact that we have, the state of Israel and what happens over there and all the fights over all that stuff, I mean, it's going to continue because biblically it says it's going to happen until there's going to be a terrible, terrible battle, which I believe that I saw in the Valley of Megiddo at Armageddon. And the thing about it is that valley over there is the most perfect natural place for a battle. And it's been built for that reason. It was created for that reason. It's an amazing place to carry out a battle. And every guy that's ever been anything big in the military says it's the perfect battle location. Yeah. So there's no doubt that there's something really very tragic and very terrible that's going to happen in that place, just like we've been told it is. And if it wasn't, then you would see things not be that way. It would be like the rest of the world, but that area has always been a place of destruction for the purpose of keeping the chosen people away from the Promised Land. So, yes, it's pretty amazing that things are like that.
Those people in those areas, I mean, we see wars over there and everything like that, and people fighting against different factions and everything like that. And I know people would love to see peace, but it's never going to happen over there because everybody wants a piece of that Promised Land.
And that's what's amazing to me, again, that something was written that says it's going to be like that. And you would think, in these other countries where people have owned it and done different stuff, it's not like that in other countries. But that one little spot of the world is a very important piece of property. And it's going to be consistently being fought over until the end of days says that when God returns and there's that terrible battle going on, that only then, if he did not return, that there would be no flesh that would ever live through what was going to happen. And when you see us fighting and the capabilities that we now have with warfare, I mean, literally, the day that we created the atomic bomb was a day that right then the world could be totally destroyed. Literally, totally destroyed.
And there's been plenty of times throughout history where it's come close to that.
That's right. And, the fact that even in Scripture it talks about that, the skin is literally taken from the bone and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's like it's telling us what it would be like in an atomic explosion where, things just totally disintegrate. And it's amazing to me that back in the day that John the Revelator wrote that, he didn't know anything about an atomic bomb. So it tells you that, again, a human being did not write. They may have been given the information, but they could have never written it like this, and it come to pass like it is doing so perfectly. I mean, it's perfect. And I'm actually amazed sometimes by the research that I have done, how it is just falling one after the other into place and fulfilling every aspect of it, not leaving any stone unturned. It's literally hitting every last thing. I mean, who would have ever thought that there could be something changing in the sun, moon, and stars? That was the thing that people said, well, the reason we're having the deaths of the animals on this planet is because we have the fluorocarbons and whatever, and we're killing our planet. Well, there's nobody on Mars, but yet they're having problems on Mars. There's nothing on the sun, yet the sun is having its own, problems. And then we're starting to see the meteorites, how much bigger they are, hitting our atmosphere, actually hitting the ground. I mean, it's getting to the point, all of this stuff is getting a little worse and a little worse. And then it talks about the sea giving up its dead. Just look this past year in Florida with all the algae that was all over those big lakes down there. And it was literally killing everything that was in there. It was leaving nothing alive. So now we've got a situation where all over the oceans, all over our planet, there's dead spots where there's nothing that's alive, not even, the plankton. There's nothing left in those areas. It's dead. And then you start looking at the loss of ice on the, in our northern hemispheres, southern hemisphere, everything is changing. It's not the same. It's just like where I live in South Georgia. We've never had hurricanes come through this area and destroy stuff. And literally, we have had 3 in the last 2 years that were just devastating. And my house was even damaged in this last one called Michael. We just didn't have problems like that. We didn't have problems with tornadoes. Now it's like every time you turn around, there's a tornado and trees are down and all this kind of stuff. When I was growing up, there might be a limb down. You might get a tree every now and then. You never had lightning after probably September until it got into spring, sometime around maybe last part of March, early part of April. Now we have these huge thunderstorms. We have major lightning, things that just are totally different than what it was, let's say, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So the fact that we can literally look at that scientifically and say, okay, here's the numbers, here's how they are, this is how more intense they're getting. So, I mean, scripture-wise, all of that has been told to us that it's going to come to pass, and that this Antichrist will be rising to power in these last days. And to me, we're in the perfect setup right now for a man to walk in and proclaim to be God in the flesh. And I truly believe that's what he's going to do, and that he really is going to be walking in flesh that somebody has taken and made for him to walk in, because it tells us in Scripture that he's a man. It doesn't say he's a machine. It doesn't say he's some strange entity out there coming in a UFO. It does not say that. It says he is a man with a number. His number is 666. And if that's the case, then that means with everything else, when it says all these other things, signs will be happening, and this man's going to come up, in and get involved, and he's going to have a false prophet that's going to be helping with the religions of the world accept him. Never in our history have we ever seen a pope that said, hey, let's put all these religions under one umbrella and let's just encompass everybody's beliefs and not separate them, and we're just going to say that we all worship the same God by different names. So that false prophet is also among us right now, because we have not seen up until the last two popes that change happen.
Yeah.
So that means that the man of perdition, the man that is going to bring about the abomination of desolation, the man that's going to stand in the temple of God and proclaim that he is walking in the flesh of God, has to be alive right now, because we're seeing everything else happening.
Yeah.
And so, I've tried to incorporate that into my research so that people can see how that man could come to be and how he meets the qualifications of what John the Revelator wrote in Revelation 13 about this image of the beast, and what he was talking about is an iconic thing, that it's a real thing, it's a real man who has real unusual powers, and anybody that understands the spiritual world understands that you have spiritual gifts, whether you're for Satan or whether you're for God. There's spiritual gifts that's going on around us all the time. And power can be given to people under those circumstances. It's no different than a person who, there's stories of people that their children start to get run over and they pick up a car. I mean, there's things that you can do that you normally couldn't do under certain circumstances. And I know you were mentioning about exorcism of demons. When you encounter a person who has a demonic force within them, I have literally seen people that were probably like 5'5" and probably weigh 120 pounds throw 3 deputy sheriffs across a jail.
Yeah.
Because of the entity that was in that person.
Yeah.
And no other time could a person that size do that.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about that in a second, but we do have a question for you in the chat. It says, I always wondered, if we have free will, why is there judgment after we die?
Well, you have the free will in the fact that when God created you, he did not want a robot. If he had created us all to always do good and not have choice, then we would have been a robot, and he would have had a type of love that would have not been free love.
Yeah. And
for him to create us as free beings to make our choices, and it really kind of came about because of what happened with Lucifer. He chose not to follow that pathway. He chose not to be in total light. He chose to live in darkness. And we had that same choice. I mean, that's why we were created on a plane that we actually die and go to judgment instead of being created as spiritual beings. That is why if God had allowed Adam and Eve to eat of the tree of good and evil and then turn around and eat of the tree of life, we would have been in a spiritual state like Satan that's immortal and never has a chance for redemption. Now, we are born because of what happened. We didn't receive the curse like Satan did because he was already immortal. We were able to have our spirit. We can make the choices. We can make our choice good or bad, to do what the Bible says or not do what the law says, and end up possibly getting the chance to go back into paradise. And with the advent of Jesus going to the cross, it gave us a chance at salvation that we would have never had without his grace and mercy for that, because we were fallen. We were in that fallen state. So to be able to make a choice and be able to make that choice for good or evil, then you're going to stand in judgment for the choices you made, no different than what Satan's going to stand in judgment in his immortal state one day and end up in darkness forever. You have the choice like he did. You want to be with him or you want to be with God. It's your choice. If you hadn't have been, you'd just been a robot and there would never have been free will.
All right, so let's get back into what's going on nowadays, what we're seeing go on. You talked about the storms and everything like that. And, I mean, storms have been increasing in intensity and everything like that. Of course, one thing that I was able to do that nobody kind of believed me until it actually happened was when Hurricane Katrina was off the east coast of Florida. I was looking at the map and where it was projecting it to go, and it was out that far on the east coast of Florida. It was saying it would go up the coast or maybe hit Florida and go up Georgia and stuff like that. But they weren't mentioning New Orleans at the time. So I was looking at the map and I was like, okay, this is exactly where the eye of the storm is going to hit. And I didn't say New Orleans. There was I forget the name of the town right on the coast of Mississippi where the eye actually hit. I pointed out that spot before it even hit the east coast of Florida. I knew it was going to be strong. It was going to be devastating. But I said, this is where people need to get out because the eye of the storm is going to be the strongest part. Of course, the outer bands have their dangerous spots too, which did damage in New Orleans. But I said, where that eye of the storm, this is going to be the worst part of that storm. And it's going to hit in this one little town of Mississippi on the coast. And I was like, this is where it's going to hit. They're saying it's going up in Georgia or up the coast. I was like, no, it's going to cut through Florida. It's going to regain in strength because of the warm waters, and it's going to hit right there. And people didn't believe me, but as soon as it hit where it hit, they're like, how the hell did you know that was going to happen? I was like, one, I watched how the hurricane was turning, and two, I was given a message from the spirit realm that said this is where it's going to happen. So, I mean, there is so much happening in this world. Now, what do you see that might also increase as we get closer to the time of judgment?
I think the lawlessness is going to get to be the biggest thing. I mean, we're already seeing how, like you mentioned, people just hate people for simple little reasons, if you're Republican or Democrat, and nobody's looking at the whole picture. I mean, when you start to go down and you vote for a candidate, years ago, I mean, people voted across party lines for the candidate who had the best decisions about whatever needed to be done. Now it's just a straight ticket vote, and you're not really looking at what each one of the candidates is really bringing to the table and talking about. All of a sudden, individuality has gone by the wayside, and now it's like two groups against each other. And we're being set up like that. And that's what worries me, is that people don't go back and look at history. One of the biggest things is like in Cambodia, when Pol Pot decided to get those people to give up their guns, which, you know, we hear all the time about we need to give up our guns. And it was for him to take over as dictator and then mass murder.
Yes,
it's very important. Hitler did exactly the same thing. And another thing that Hitler did is he went to his younger group, and he took that younger crowd that had been taken away from parents, and he began to make that the children the pinpoint of going after the change. And he did that in such a way that they didn't mind killing, you know, mothers and dads and uncles and whatever for the sake of his regiment. And if you look at that and you look at things like we are doing now, where our medical field will tell somebody that's 80 years old, well, I'm sorry, you're not worthy enough to get chemo because of your age. Well, there's a lot of people that live to be 100 years old. But if you end up being one of those kind of people and they don't think it's worthy to spend that money on you, it's almost like a euthanasia. Dr. Kevorkian that's freely able to get rid of people today for any reason deemed that you're not good enough for society. You're not putting nothing back. And we're getting into the point where people's lives and concern for your fellow man doesn't exist. And that takes us back to the days of Adam and Eve where Cain killed Abel. Cain was the first murderer. When God confronted him about it, he told the Creator, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And almost in a rebellious state. And today, like I mentioned, more people are out interested in filming something going wrong and putting it on Facebook than trying to help someone. I can't help but think I think a year or so ago there was a mental retarded boy that was, I think, drowning in Florida. And the kids videotaped it, but nobody helped the person and they died. And to me, that shows there's no love for fellow man. There is that same spirit of Cain, am I my brother's keeper? Well, yes, you are. And if you know anything about Scripture, we're all brothers and sisters because we came out of the lineage out of Eden. It makes us all kin to each other. No matter if you're black, white, red, whatever, we're all connected and we're all brothers and sisters. And the intent is that you are responsible for your brother, and you are going to be held responsible for the things that you either did to your brothers and sisters or you didn't do for your brothers and sisters.
Yeah, like I said, we're all cut from the same cloth, and people need to understand that no matter what our skin color is, what our personal beliefs are, we're still cut from that same cloth.
We are, and the thing that I've always thought a lot about is that when we talk about that, man was made from the earth and from clay. If you look at clay, it has all those colors in it, and so you can't say that clay is exactly one color. True clay has different colors mingled in it. So, like you say, we're all brothers and sisters. And we came from that same pattern that was cut back in those days when God established creation and wanted it to stay in a paradise of goodness. And unfortunately, there was a being that was already in an immortal state that caused the problem. And because he wanted to be worshipped like God, he's wanting to destroy everything God made. And if you're willing to listen at him and follow him, you're going to end up in darkness. And I tell you, if you don't know anything about darkness, shut yourself up in a closet and just no light for several days. That will drive you nuts because you'll get to the point that you feel like you're losing it and about to go nuts. I mean, that's the best way to get somebody in a mess is to just put them in total darkness.
Yeah, well,
and you just lock them up.
I was going to say, there are, I'm going to use Alcatraz as an example. There is a solitary confinement on Alcatraz that nobody wants to go in there alone, let alone with the lights out and the door closed and everything like that, because they're afraid of the darkness, and that's just a real quick thing if they were to do it. But like you were saying, imagine being in total darkness where you can't see anything. And let's see, I don't know if we can take this call. Joy, if I happen to lose you, go ahead and call back. But I'm going to take this call real quick. You there? Okay, you're on there on Talking Tonight. Hopefully I didn't lose my guest here.
Here I am. I'm back. I don't know what happened.
Oh, okay. It was you calling. Okay, I was like, wait.
I'm
Joy,
like, what happened?
Oh.
I think that the spirit world did not want us to talk about darkness. I'll be honest with you. I've been on shows before, and we would get talking about light and darkness, and weird things would start happening. And I really, I know how earth energies are, and I know how things affect paranormal things, affect things. So it's not uncommon sometimes for things like this to happen.
Yeah, I don't know. I was talking about the whole thing of Alcatraz and like people want to, that'll go in there, but they won't turn out the lights and close the door because the darkness in there. They're afraid of it. But I'm the kind of person that would actually want to go in there by myself with the lights out and the door closed. But the only reason why I would do something like that is because I know I am protected by that white light. And a lot of people don't understand that if you go to that light, that pureness to help protect you from this darkness, the evil that is in our world today, you're going to be afraid of that rather than face it.
Well, darkness has such power, and that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. Like I mentioned, with God there's power, with darkness there's power. And you're fighting, and it tells us that. Again, biblically it says that, you have to be careful that you're not fighting against flesh and blood. So sometimes when people do things to you and it upsets you, you've got to stop and remember that there is a highness in hierarchies in these fallen angels and in good angels and God and Satan, that it says you're fighting against principalities and powers in higher places, meaning that it's something that you literally can't see, but it can watch us. It talks about the watchers in the Bible, and that they know everything. It's like if you could sit in silence and kind of incognito in a situation, how much better you could come at your enemy if they couldn't see you, but yet you could hear them and watch them and know what they were doing and what they did in secret. You'd be ahead of the ball game. So these things, and that bothers a lot of people, especially when they read my work. I was telling you about, they don't like to go to sleep at night after they read it, because all of a sudden you realize there is something around us. There is something watching us. There is something really here with us. That this thing has been with us since the beginning, and it's real.
We're at the last commercial break of the night, but we'll be right back with my guest, Dr. Joy Pugh, as we talk about the Antichrist and what's coming and what this world's coming to. We'll be right back. During the week of November 12th through the 16th, Talk in the Night will honor all those that served in the military by having all the show's guests as veterans, Monday through Thursday, and with a special open line Friday where veterans can call in and share anything. Just for Talk in the Night listeners, when you go to Past Life Regression and Progression.com and mention Talk in the Night at purchase, you will receive 50% off of the books. Regular price $20 down to $10 plus mailing costs. Just go to Past Life Regression and Progression.com or click on the banner ad on the Talk in the Night website. On Friday night, one lucky listener will have a chance to win a copy of Antichrist, the Clone Image of Jesus Christ by Dr. Joy Pugh, the new updated 2017 edition. The winner must call into the show to win the book during the live open line broadcast.
The sun, to dream, believe in strength. Now I'm the only one.
into the show, Skype, Talk in the Night, or by phone at 817-717-5561. And now, back to Talk in the Night with your host, Paranormal Phil. Okay, and we are back for the last segment of the show. And before the commercial break, we had where we lost the guest, and I didn't even notice it until I got a call coming in. I'm like, okay, somebody's calling in. Hopefully I don't lose my guest when I answer the call. Turns out we lost the guest. Weird things happen when you start talking about the dark side of things. But
it does. I mean, I've seen it happen over and over and over again.
All right. So one thing we haven't talked about tonight is your books. Since we're in the last half hour of the show, tell us a little bit about your books and what each book just briefly what each book covers.
Well, the book that we're going to give away tonight is Antichrist, the cloned image of Jesus Christ. And it talks about the Shroud of Turin and how that shroud, that researchers had gone in and researched the shroud and how blood was taken from the shroud and how I believe that blood was in fact used in a cloning. And that the man that will be in this iconic image that John wrote about, that is in this image of an icon, is in fact the image from that shroud using the blood that was on that shroud. So that Antichrist book is what we're giving away, and that was my groundbreaking book. It was actually a bestseller. And then my Eden series, Eden, the Knowledge of Good and Evil, 666, is a 2-volume book series now. And it is just chock full of everything you can think of. I mean, it has everything from the beginning of time all the way to the end of days. It talks about especially the secret societies and how they have been underpinning a lot of things in the world. And it also has a lot of things in there about the UFOs, cattle mutilations, has a lot of things about cloning. It has a lot of things about biotechnology, biogenetics. Everything you can imagine is in Eden, and it really shows you how history from the day that we came out of Eden, that things have been happening to bring us to this point in time in which we're going to see what we're seeing, and that is an Antichrist come to power, as well as all the changes and things that are happening in the world. And I tie them all together, because all these things are all, I mean, from the megalithic stone structures to the Knights Templar, I mean, everything's in that book. It's a constant bam, bam, bam with information. I mean, you will not be bored in that. And then my Beguile series is a 3-volume series. It's Beguile, Eden to Armageddon. And what it does, it also talks about the Shroud of Turin, but it also brings in a lot of the things that are happening today. It talks about all the changes in the sun, moon, and stars and all the things that's been happening around the world, like the deaths of animals and what's involved when those things have died, as well as talking about the seed lines that came out of Eden and how the serpent and Eve and Adam had a sexual relationship that created another lineage through Cain that was the reason the flood was brought about. And it talks about the genetics and things that happened with that. And then it also talks about the pineal gland and how the pineal gland is a third eye that's in our forehead, and how all of this present stuff that we're dealing with right now is being targeted at you using things that affect that eye without you knowing about it, almost in a subliminal kind of way. And it also, in the 3rd volume, goes into great detail about the Antichrist and the possibility of cloning and how the royal families have existed from the flood and how they've been thoroughbreds and how they are among us, but they're different from us. And I consider that a serpent lineage. So it's very, very detailed. There's 3 books. In fact, all these books are indexed and have bibliographies and that kind of stuff, so that you really get an understanding. If you're watching something on TV, you can just go to one of these books and find something on that. And then my last book is Parables of Joy on a Georgia Farm. And these are stories about my childhood and growing up and how all these things that happened to me, and I mentioned about my first experience with a UFO in there, some of the spiritual things that have happened to me. You will laugh, you will cry, you will be happy in some aspects of it, but it lets you know who I am and why I'm doing what I do. It talks about this dream that I had when I was 6. So there's some really good things in Parables of Joy, and I felt like it was a book that people could get to know me so that when you read my work, you understand why I go into such great detail in my research, because I'm really trying to tell you the truth as it really exists and not use it to try to sway a situation about something that I don't know anything about. Yeah, everything that I research, I've researched it.
Yeah, like me, I don't try to change anybody's opinion because that's not my decision to make. I'm not God. I can't say, you got to believe this or anything like that. I put out the information so that way people can use their free will to make their own decision and everything like that. Now, talking about the floods, or the great flood of Noah's time, and everything like that. Now, there have been, I've seen ancient alien things on TV talking about, like, Atlantis and everything like that, and, like, that great flood wiped out that civilization, or this is the theory of it, that wiped out that civilization because it was becoming like what we are today, and God just wiped it out and restarted all over again.
Well, you've got the Tower of Babel that was trying to do the same thing, unite everybody under one umbrella against the Creator. And, of course, we know what happened in that situation is that God caused the ability of the people to communicate to be messed up so that they couldn't communicate with one another and continue on a course that was just going to bring about another bad situation. So the fact that Atlantis is mentioned by Plato, I find that very interesting because he tells where the location of that particular area was, and we know from the research that's been done about in those areas that there is an area out in the ocean that is a muddy area that's very strange. And as we get to the point that we can put more submarines and test things, we're going to find more of this. It's just like some of the biblical cities that people said didn't exist now that with the archaeological finds, with ability to use, satellites to do a bunch of things, we found that those cities that at one time they believe were just mythological really did exist. I mean, so all this is coming to fruition and really proven that what the Bible has told us in regards to these cities and that kind of thing are real. I think it's very interesting, some of the pyramids and things that have been found under the water. How did it get there? Why is the water on top of them? They couldn't have built those things under the water. They at one time were on land.
Yeah,
and like I mentioned earlier,
road and stuff like that down off the Florida Keys and stuff like that. The whole structure,
it's real.
The road, but it's under plenty of water, and it's like, well, at one time that had to be above ground because they're not going to build it underneath the sea.
That's right. And so I think, if anything, as we get the scientific technology to film that, show that, it's like the little image stuff that we've got on Mount Ararat that they won't let us go up there and get a piece of the ark. They're going to find one day when we finally let us up there, the ark's up there. And what that's going to do is prove that everything about the flood was real. But it's kind of like nobody wants to let that out yet. And same thing with the shroud. When I was doing the research on the shroud, they keep saying, oh, well, it's a painting, or, oh, it was done in the Middle Ages, or, oh, Da Vinci painted it. Well, the more you research it and the more scientific, analysis of it keeps happening, we now know that shroud was during the time of Jesus. And the things that they've taken off the shroud, like certain flowers and certain types of stone that would have been like on his heel, the dust from the tomb, all that stuff's on the shroud. Well, you can't really say somebody that had the ability to paint that went out and got all the little things and put it on there.
Yeah.
That's just not possible. And the fact that that cloth looks like I was talking about, pure energy went through it. It didn't burn the cloth, but it did like a laser. It literally left that image on that cloth. And, of course, in my research, I traced that cloth from the time it was in that tomb all the way up until where it's at in Turin right now and is owned by the Catholic Church. I mean, I've got the history of it all the way up until that point. And then you've got a face napkin that's over in Avita, Spain. It's got the same blood. It's got the same spots of blood in the same place. And then that face napkin was also there in the tomb when Jesus' disciples came in there. But that particular napkin has been in Spain, within 500 AD, so that it wasn't painted by Da Vinci. It's got the same blood. It's got the same spots. It proves that the shroud is really real. It's the same exact thing. So you can't say that somebody manufactured that or made that or whatever. But it's like it has taken so many years to get to where science can literally prove it. It's just like we can prove that there's been a flood because we can go look at sediments. I mean, there are some places up in the mountains that have seawater and shells and stuff that shows that the water once covered those mountains because you couldn't have salt water up in those areas. Yeah. It's not possible. So it means that something really did cover the earth. So the more that science is able to prove this stuff, the more we're going to see it have to be put out there. Sometimes they kind of keep it hidden and don't put it on like the top 10 things of the news because they don't really want us to know the truth. Once we know the truth, then we can go, oh my gosh, then what the Bible told us about the flood, about Noah, about there's life after death. I mean, just look at the things that all this would prove to us if we could find it, if Atlantis was found. You know what I'm saying? All these kinds of things would literally solidify us in a different mind and concept that I think that Satan and his minions are trying desperately to keep us fighting with each other, not working together, not loving our fellow man, and sending us into darkness when our Creator really wants us to go into light. Yeah. And it's a scary thing when you really see that happening around you and you go, why can't people see this? But we are being so blinded by entities that we cannot see that are manipulating it to make it happen. And that's why it's so important that people understand when you read the Bible, it is a paranormal book. We are living in a world that is full of spiritual beings all around us.
All right.
And unless you get it, you just don't get it.
All right. So we have another question in the chat. It says, has anything supernatural happened to you as you were researching these findings?
Oh, listen, yes. I've lost things, which I'm like, how did that happen to my computer? I've had printers go off. I've had printers not work. I've lost information that I know that I had. Just weird things. The lights go out. I've been on shows and we would be talking about pineal gland kind of things, especially, or anything to do with light and darkness.
Yeah,
and
like what happened earlier where the call dropped.
It just drops. And I've had it like where the server at the radio station would go down and put us out. I mean, it just weird things that should never have happened. So to me, it literally proves sometimes that there's something going on that's manipulating and changing things. And I've had to learn that when I encounter those things where it used to frustrate me greatly. I mean, I've lost a whole book before under situations that nobody can explain. Instead of trying just to cry my eyes out about stuff, which I used to do a lot of because it would upset me so much, I now stop and go, there's a reason why this just happened, because there's not a real reason it should have happened. And then once you realize that we are living in a world where there's things that we can't see, then you get a real grip of the manipulation that's going on and the control in your life. And sometimes you need to be paying attention why you're choosing to do what you're doing, and that you're not being led by some spirit, even in people. I mean, people can come into your life and you think the world of them, all of a sudden they're manipulating you to the point like, what in the world is going on here? And then if you'll step back and take a look, you can actually see. And lots of times, especially my close friends, I'll go, oh my gosh, that was a satanic play right there. Because now things like that throw up red flags for me. And I'm like, that wasn't the truth. And then I have discernment. Instead of crying about it or being upset about it, all of a sudden I see the game that's being played. And the darkness is manipulating a person. And they don't even realize it. So it's been a learning experience for me, but the spiritual realm plays a big part of what's going on. And I would really say that today is worse because these entities know that Jesus, what he said, he's coming back. They know they've got a time frame. They know that these things are going to happen because they are immortal beings. Mm-hmm. They're not like you and I. Yeah. So they've got an understanding of what the game is. And that one day the game's going to be up.
They already know what's going to happen. They're just waiting for it to happen.
Right, and they're trying to get as many people to fall into darkness with them. They don't care about us. They're just an enemy that wants to destroy you from ever being with the Creator that wanted you to have pure light. That's all they're after, is your soul.
All right, so we're running out of time. We got about 8 minutes left in the show. Real quick, I wanted to ask a quick question, and then I wanted to let you tell people where they can find your information and everything like that. But playing the devil's advocate, if you will, it has been a video out. It's been out for quite a while. It was from a so-called former Catholic bishop that said the hell was created by the Catholic Church to scare people. Real quick, what is your thoughts on that? And then we'll let you tell people where they can find information on you.
Well, the Catholic Church kind of believes in purgatory, and you can pray somebody out of it and all that kind of stuff. And I think that they created that aspect of it. In the beginning, it was that, either you're in lightness or in darkness. So hell is a place that I truly believe exists in this world, and that it's under our feet and it's in the ground. And the research that I did on UFOs coming out of volcanoes and the fact that these entities have the sulfuric smells tells me that there's no doubt in my mind that hell is below us just like it says it is, and that heaven is above us just like the Bible says it is. And my hope is that I don't ever, from all that I have studied and all that I have seen, I do not want to spend eternity, which means forever, in a place like that. I want to be with the Creator, and I want to be in pure light. Because if anybody knows, when you're happy and everything's going good, that's a wonderful feeling. But when you're being hurt and tormented and whatever in darkness, and like we were talking about being put in pitch black darkness, hellfire and brimstone would be a terrible way to spend eternity. Because we only get a couple, 70, 80 years on this planet and the way that we're living now. I can't imagine living in a terrible situation worse than anything that we would ever experience here as a negative, bad thing for eternity. And I think that's where you as a person have to make your mind up how important is eternity to you. Even though you can't see it, you're going to go in one place or the other because your energy never dies, and it's going to spend eternity somewhere, whether it's in darkness or whether it's in light.
All right.
My website is www.drjoye, and it's DRJOYE.com. It's joy with an E, DRJOYE.com. And all my books are there. You can click on them. There's a form there. If you have wanted to ask a question, was a little bit nervous about doing that, you can fill out that form. I get emails from all over the world. I do try to answer really quickly little things that I can because I have so many. And then also you can click on the links and it'll take you out, how you can buy my books and that kind of thing. It's real simple. And then my Facebook page is Joy Pugh, JOYEPUGH. And you can keep up when I'm going to be on radio shows and that kind of stuff. Everything's listed so you can keep up and follow my work.
All right. Thank you again for coming on the show. It was a pleasure having you on and everything like that. I wish we could have had more time to get into a lot more. But maybe in a future show we'll bring you back and talk about the things we did not get a chance to talk to. But Dr. Joy's website is linked up on the Talking the Night website. Click on the little banner ad and everything like that. You can find information on her. And like she said, you can ask questions there if you did not want to call into tonight's show or felt nervous about asking a question. You can ask the question there. So again, thank you, Dr. Joy, for coming on the show. It was a pleasure having you on and learning about this and giving people a chance to open their minds to different possibilities.
Well, listen, I appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to an opportunity to come back and even discuss even more of the research that I have done on other aspects of what's happening in the world today.
All right. And for those listening, tomorrow night we are going to be doing open lines where you, the listeners, can call in, share your stories, experiences, or even ask a question. It doesn't have to be about the paranormal. Believe it or not, I've been on this earth 45 years. I know a lot of things. I've learned a lot over the many years that I've been here. And of course, I believe in past lives, so I've been here a very long time. So I can answer some questions about relationships. I've been in some bad ones, good ones. I can answer stuff on a little bit on technology, but most of my experiences in the paranormal. So tomorrow night is Friday Night Open Lines where you can ask questions or share your stories and experiences. And then, of course, next week, Monday through Thursday, I'm going to have guests on that are United States military veterans all week long to talk about veteran issues and everything like that. So if you got a veteran friend or you are a veteran, next week is the week you want to tune in because I'm doing this whole week to honor our nation's military veterans since I'm a veteran myself, and I want to do this for those that have served this country and some that have never come back. So until tomorrow night when we open up the lines for Friday Night Open Lines, I want to thank everybody tuning in. I want to thank my guest, Dr. Joy, for coming on the show. And until tomorrow night, I shall see you on the dark side. Good night from Talking the Night.